G'day guys, it's Calvin from the Car Tune Company in New Zealand. I'm doing something just the same as every other job, but again it's a little bit different. But I use the same process. So what we're going to do today is talk about the process that I use when I'm doing my wiring. Over the years of doing this job and previous as, I'm going to say, a normal mechanic, I've built up a toolbox of knowledge that I can apply when I do my jobs. My wiring jobs, I pretty much apply the same process to all of them. But every single one is a little bit different, a little bit modified. But to me, it's pretty much the same thing. The goal, of course, is to have an engine that runs at the other end of the process. So the subject for today is a 2UZ Land Cruiser harness out of a UZJ100 Land Cruiser. We've got a little bit of history on this one. It was actually out of an embassy car or an official car. And at the end of their usage on these cars, they often get pulled apart and stripped down. I'm not completely sure of the reasoning for that, but if other people know, hey, we could have a chat about that. It'd be interesting to know. Bulletproof glass and a few other little bits and pieces to make it a special vehicle. But at the end of its use, it isn't sold to the public. It's stripped and thrown away. Some are crushed. This particular engine has had some stuff sat on it, so there's a few bits broken. The customer's trying to sort that. I've sourced a power steer pulley and some other bits and pieces for it. And then moving on to the harness, which is my job to get sorted. I've got pinouts for the ECU, but I don't have the body plugs nicely. So we're going to go through and I'll show you how I get the body plugs and confirm my wiring is correct. Of course, for most of the 1UZ range, I've got that and I sell a set of instructions on how to wire it. So I'm just applying that knowledge to a loom that I haven't seen before. And it also helps if you've got a loom that's been modified or changed to work out what the last person's done in their wiring so you can repair it and fix it and move forward. Same process gets applied. For this job, the first thing I do is work out what I've got. So a quick search in Toyo DIY brings up it's a 98 to 02 UZJ100 Land Cruiser. So I plugged in the ECU number, and this one's interesting too because it's 89666, which we don't see a lot. 60 is for Land Cruiser, and then there's the number. I put all the variances in, and we came up with two models of European spec VX Cruiser, 2UZ left-hand and right-hand drive. We would have been a right-hand drive, so I clicked on there, I went back through, and I found that it actually had a immobilizer listed for that ECU. Immobilizer was a question mark on this one, so I started in to check on that. With the ECU and loom identified on what car it's out of, and I find Toyo DIY a fantastic website for matching and seeing where they fit. I then connected up a few wires, put the pins on, scan tool connector into the scan tool, and on every one I get this warning that says communication error. I cannot gain communication with that ECU. So that was a bit of a problem. I did a bit of searching and checking. I happened to find another ECU from a similar year of vehicle, and I checked this number against Toyo DIY. I then referenced it with the immobilizer equipment. Also grabbed the replacement. It's a Japanese one. You can see here it's marked as Japan. 89661. Again, 60 Land Cruiser. 630 for the ECU number. We had a bit of a look in here. Brings up this screen. We're gonna go backwards a little bit. We look through here, and what you will see, or not see, is there's no immobilizer listed for that ECU. So that was kind of a double bonus, really. And that one comes up with not having an immobilizer. So I have a stuffed ECU. I have a good ECU with no immobilizer listed. So I'm reasonably confident that this is going to do the job. Reference the pinout against that one, and it's looking good. I have this morning plugged in this one to the scan tool, and of course I'm checking that it's physically good inside as well. I did a visual of it. It communicates. It doesn't bring up an immobilizer code. When I go into the immobilizer heading menu on my scan tool, it doesn't communicate, which is typical of no immobilizer. Sometimes they go in and give me no codes. So I'm crossing my fingers that this one doesn't have immobilizer. So with all that done, I'm reasonably confident I've got an ECU and a wiring loom that's going to work. And I start looking at the wiring loom and checking it over. Next thing, I want to identify all the wires in this plug. And whether I've got diagrams or instructions or regardless, I still want to know what these wires are. Very quickly looking at it. Black red, that's going to be from the main relay. Black yellow, that's going to be permanent battery power. On the other side, red blue, that's going to be permanent battery for the drive-by-wire system. It's very much like a 1UZ VVTi, so very similar. So I'm just going to very quickly check against some diagrams, and I'm writing up my own just to put it in a form that I understand very quickly. And there's not that many wires. And then I'll do the same with this plug as well. With the ECU identified, the pins identified correctly, I move on to the body plugs. Even if I've got proper instructions and proper body plugs, I still confirm. For example, the UCF20, there are two main alternatives for different body plugs. This one, I go straight to the easy ones to start with. So I've got this 4-pin plug. It's got a big black-white wire. I noticed on the start inhibit, it's got a big black-white wire. Bang. That is the correct wire. There's numbers on here. It's pin 9, so I make notes. There was also a big black red down here, so that's really easy. That's sorted as well. Black red is normally a power supply, so I was a little surprised to find them on the start inhibit. And we've got coils and injectors with black red. There it is there. That's a coil wire. Coil wire. That's pin 2. That makes the other one in this pin number 4. And I'm guessing that will be coil, will be injectors. It is there, injector. That's my injector power supply. Moving on with tracing my wires. I've got another body plug. Oxygen sensors are going to need voltage. So really simple. In we go there. I confirm with the other oxygen sensor. It's got continuity to there. It does. Head over to this one, and there's a black yellow here. It's not that one. There's another black yellow down the bottom. And each of these plugs has normally got a number on them. So if you want to order replacements, there's the number. And often they've got the pin positions numbered as well. I've drawn myself a little diagram, and it's number 17. Recorded as black yellow, 12 volt 202. While I was working on it, I found some broken wires here to run down to the oxygen sensor so they can be repaired. There's no airflow meter in this loom, which is a little bit of a pain. The loom's in really good order, so I was hoping not to cut it to pieces, but it looks like the airflow meter comes through in the body wiring, which would explain some of this wiring over at the ECU plugs that would normally go out to the engine. So I continue with each and every wire, so I identify these body plugs. And I've already looked at a couple of my wiring diagrams, and this one is a little bit different. Looks like it was a different model, being the embassy car for some reason. And this way I'll make sure it's all correct. Back to work. I popped some tape off to find these interesting little joiners in here. These are all shields, earth shields. Those brown wires are earths. There's another lot of earths for something, but this one was interesting. I was looking for the oil level sensor, and it was blue on this end, and it came through, and I couldn't find where it went as a blue wire. Here it is here. There's the blue wire there. Yes, that's got continuity. And it leaves as a blue-black. And hiding underneath the ECU plugs, there was this one. Look at that. There is our oil level. And I think if I pop into the water temp, should be up by here. And that is a green red. There happens to be a green red right here. No, there's another one down here. I spotted a white wire. I think oil pressure is white. No, 10, 11. Oil pressure by the crank angle. White. A pen probably doesn't check continuity. That one. Look at that. 9, 10. So I just have to work out what those wires are, and those wires are, and those ones. Some of these will be airflow meter. We've got transfer case, which is down here. Yep, there's ones. These ones. So they will be quite easy to trace. That's oxygen sensor, that's a sub-oxygen sensor. So a bit of knowledge of what is in the loom, and it makes it much easier to trace the wires. So I've now gone through, traced the wiring from there, confirmed it against the wiring out here. Everything all done through these plugs. One thing we will note out in this area is there's no airflow meter plug. It simply doesn't exist. I've already gained communication with the ECU, and this loom is very, very similar to a 1UZ VVTi loom, but there's enough pins changed around that it won't work. It's kind of cool. a little bit boggling in the differences that they made and then why. This one, of course, no VVTI. It's a non-VVTI 2UZ. Fortunately, with normally the diagrams that I sell, there aren't that many changes, and I've got the differences in them. But 2UZs between a Tundra and a Land Cruiser and a 4Runner all seem to be different. I did fire up my 1UZ VVTI recently on a Tundra ECU to confirm there wasn't a immobilizer, and I was able to make that work. 1UZ VVTI, new adapter loom, a 2UZ ECU. It may not run perfectly well, but it does run, and it allows me to check immobilizers and that sort of stuff on the 2UZs. This one I'm going to put onto my test engine, which is actually a 3UZ, and not connect the VVTI. The triggers are the same. That should make it run. I need to make a decision on the airflow meter. I would like the wiring in the loom because I think it would make it easier and neater and tidier. I didn't really want to split this loom apart because it's a sweetheart. Like, I haven't seen a loom this good since the one I did for Thailand, which is probably only about 6 months ago, but it's a really tidy loom. I think this one might be tidier than Thailand. The coil plugs are all 100% intact. The injector plugs are not even cracked down in here where they normally crack. Everything is really good. The only thing I did find, because of my time getting very intimate with this loom, is the oxygen sensor control wires have been crushed at some point. So for the heater circuit, that's the earth, and that's heater control. That's a 12-volt supply, so I'll give that a little bit of a tidy up. So this one is really cool. I might at the same time drop some fan switch wiring in. Don't know what the man's doing with fan switch. Apart from that, put some relays and fuses on it. We're pretty much good to go. This is a really good one to do. Bang it on an engine, make it run, call it good. Right now, I'm going to make a consideration on that airflow meter, see what I'm going to do. I may actually take a bit of a break, have some food, have some dinner, and come back to whether I'm going to pull this apart and put that airflow meter wiring in the loom itself. So it really does look like I've made the decision to add the extra wires to the wiring loom. And it does look like I've missed this one. Oh no, there it is, look, oh wicked, woohoo! That is awesome. So I've used a piece of steel insert out of a wiper blade, and they work really well. I'm going to have to untape it. Oh no, there we go, that one's coming out. So that's for the fan, and black, that's for the fan. Awesome. And these ones, these 5 for the airflow meter, and they are going through here, up to this point here, and popping out of there. I added the fan wiring while I was in here. Interesting to note, we have the little noise suppressor. So instead of being earthed onto the plenum itself, it's tucked inside this box and it has an earth running to it. So pin 2 is now an earth, pin 1 is the power, which is very interesting. Well, for me anyway. I have this strange interest in 1UZ oddities. And we have airflow meter wiring, which I think late at night, I may have thought things were longer than they really are. But it was late at night. We always have those problems, don't we? But when it's late at night, we're allowed to think that things are longer than they really are. As long as it does the job correctly, we should all be happy. And then a bit of tape got slammed onto it. And back to looking almost standard, but with new tape. I even put that stuff back on there because into the Land Cruiser or into the Prado, it goes straight in through the grommet hole. I'm not sure that that hole's going to be the right size. But I also need to be very careful to keep this area here as small as possible because it is tight going into a Land Cruiser. So now my focus is going to be in this area. I've got my new diagrams. Well, the diagrams I've made up. Because I wire so many of these Toyotas, it's quite straightforward for me to decipher where things are going and what things are doing. I've gone over my information from 98 to 2002, and none of it is an exact match for this one, but some are very, very close. So I'm going to go through and match up the bits that work on this one. Should be fine. I've got communication with the scan tool, and both of those ECUs, the communication ports across those years all match, confirming that the first ECU is stuffed. And it is the one that matches this loom out of the vehicle that this came with and the 2 wiring plugs I got. So I can tell which wires were and weren't used on this model. So that's really helpful. The airflow meter wiring isn't connected at that end and it isn't connected at this end. So there's no soldering, crimp, new terminals on into the ECU itself, so that tidies that up. This connector is leaving. It's going to have a join tucked into the loom. These 2 are staying. We'll put suitable plugs on that and that, because we don't have the other side. Or some of this is airflow meter, so that can be broken down a bit and some extras can come out that we don't need and be matched appropriately. So some of these will go to relays and some will go to dash. So 2 different plugs, same as that one. Easy as. I've been doing some stuff. And my lens is really fucking dirty. Must remember to clean my lens. We have a fuse box and relays. The reason I don't show how to do that on all my public videos is because I save that for my paying customers. Because that's the magic bit of these looms. This bit, not so much. This bit, where the magic happens. And how to connect it into that bit correctly. So I've got some of that, it plugs in. We're going to find some of the other wires that do this. And I got to this fella. The airflow meter. Yep, that airflow meter. It's So this is a 3UZ airflow meter. And I did some checking. And Land Cruisers with this ECU run a different airflow meter. It isn't even made by Denso. It's made by Hitachi. So that is another bit of fun. It's the same plug though. So I'm going to wire a 3UZ1 or a 171 Crown, Altezza, Heap, Toyota Echo. It's a really common one, so it's easy to get. But it just so happened too that I had a Hilux turn up. 3RZ, so it's like a 149 two-wheel drive 1999 Hilux. It's got the same airflow meter that this Land Cruiser has. So let's have a look and have a little comparison. Ta-da! Here we go. 4-cylinder. And look at that. There's the airflow meter. Compares with that one. So very, very similar, but it's different. I wonder if they actually bolt in. I might check that. I might check if it bolts in. And this one has got air temp over there. And this one's got, right in the middle, it's got a power feed, so quite different. However, they do interchange in the plug. It's really hard to do this with one hand. Same in the keying, so this got a key on the sides. They're the same. They would plug in, but they would not run well. And I think this answers that question. They are not universal fit. They do not fit in the same hole. It's like a black man's been there first, because that one doesn't even touch the sides. Just while we're under here, this one here, it also has this little fella here, which allows you to adjust your mixture. Little trick that they've got. If this one, I got my test light on, and I had my multimeter, and I probed around in here to find some voltages. So I had my air temp voltage of about 2.5 volts. I had a supply voltage of 12. I had an earth, and I had a signal return back to the ECU of about 0.5 volts sitting here not running. So I'm going to wire it for this one, which is, as I said, the 3UZ airflow meter. Nice simple little compact unit. And I whipped up some comparison diagrams. So if we ever swap, if we get the correct air filter, airflow meter body, the size is important, then we will be able to swap it around easy. With all this set up, I've got my 3UZ test engine sitting ready to go. So this is a VVTi. That is not VVTi. It'll run. The important bits, that the crank trigger is correct, that the cam sensor is correct, and the throttle body matches. So those are the important bits. This one also has the later coils. These ones with the small rectangular plug. So that's 3UZ and 2UZ coil. So let's put this, get onto that engine right now. Just like that, the loom is fitted. Power feed is fed in. And ignition in is over here on this little 12 terminal, and it goes, powers up some relays. Ta-da! Now let's see if I've got voltage at coils. Yes. And injectors. Yes. That is done. As you can see, it now runs, and I'm bloody happy about that. But there was a little bit of a twist, which I didn't show in that, is that the throttle doesn't work. Let me explain. So 1UZ, VVTi, and the 2UZ share this throttle body. This is the earlier ones. Later on they did change. And it is drive-by-wire. So I can twist this, like this, yeah, good. And you'll see it goes a long way before it contacts with the butterfly, and then you can hear it working those gears. So when I power it up, it is meant to start working. Plugged my scan tool in, and it told me that the drive-by-wire was turned off. It told me that the fail-safe was on. So there are two fail-safes, and they are things that Toyota have set up that if things go wrong, it changes the conditions. People often refer to it as limp mode, and they get confused. Well, they don't really understand it, so they call everything limp mode instead of saying, I can't bloody wire my engine properly, so it must be in limp mode. This one, fail safe, one of them, is if it doesn't get an ignition pulse, it won't let the engine start, or it'll start and stop. Fail safe. Toyota programmed fail safe into the ECU. The other one on this is it turns the throttle off. So the computer was detecting a fault, and the fault was because the pinout between the JDM and the EU one was different. Oh, I've got no idea why Toyota did this. And in fact, this Europe spec one, I've looked at Europe spec diagrams and they're all different to what I've got. But that's okay. Because I'd followed the process, I'd recorded everything, and I went through all my notes, and I basically rewrote a pinout. And what I came up with was different oxygen sensors, and one of the drive-by-wire wires was moved, and the cam and crank inputs were different. So I'm actually surprised it ran. So this is what I did to change things around. Now I have 3 wires to change. So I'm going to do that now. I'll pop them in and we'll show you the drive-by-wire working. Modification's done. We power it up and I hear the throttle humming. It's also nice and linear, which is really interesting. I was playing with an ECU the other day where the throttle opening wasn't linear and nice. Done. Another thing ticked off my list. Better put this back on and we'll make it go. runs, it has throttle. I probably should give it some gear indicators. I've talked to the owner, and he gave me the pinout for the selector switch, just to confirm it worked with my diagrams. And he's also been playing with the center diff engagement, or the diff lock, because the Land Cruisers had a center diff lock, which was pretty cool. So he's got all that working as well with some relays. Very, very similar to a surf setup with the four-wheel drive engagement, but it's a center diff lock. It's got a motor in it, pretty similar. Will work for me. We're running. Let me put in some gear inputs and those bits and pieces. Finish this off, final test, and then it'll be done. I'm feeling pretty bloody happy. Wires. I've slammed in some extra wires for the customer to fit up to the factory ECU. This is going into a Prado, like a 70 series, and this came out of a Land Cruiser. The actual wiring and the pinout from the ECU, a lot of the same pins exist. So he can go through and connect those ones up. That's going to be really cool. But I found an interesting thing where this one, even though it's OBD2, has a TE1 plug or terminal. And that's the terminal to put it into diagnostic mode. So what it does is it sets the timing at 10 degrees if the engine's running. But it also flashes the check light. I'll show you. So we're powered up. I've got the check light connected. And then I'll bridge TE1 to earth. I've added it over by the OBD2 plug. And that light will start to flash codes. And then you count the flashes. So there was an oxygen sensor code. Those are 10s and these are 1s. So there are the codes for the two sub-oxygen sensors. And it's going to repeat. The sub-oxygen sensors, the plugs are still in the loom. However, they've been taped back because we're not going to use them. And the difference in the Europe, the Jap spec changes the pins. Yeah, that's fun, eh? Right, that's pretty cool. We take that out, and that will go solid on in a moment. Seems to run through a cycle, and then it'll go solid. There it is. Just an interesting thing for me. Right, I'm going to check some gear indicators. So, scan tool. I'm going to bridge some wires to check that it's getting gear inputs. I've put in the wires in here for the STA and the neutral switch. And then I just have to do fuel pump. And we're ready to take it off the engine and send it away. So I'm getting really close. I did another video recently about the park neutral circuit, start circuit. And if you get it wrong, it gives trouble. On this one, we'll get rid of my lights in the way. I'm just using my test light to drop an earth circuit into the neutral switch, because I don't have a shifter switch or any of that stuff. So shift selector. So where we have it's showing it, and in my live data, if I can find it, it actually says on right there, and it turns on and off. So I could bridge the gears at the shifter or the gear indicator switch. However, it's going to be easier for me to do it up here at this plug. So I pop it in reverse. It's telling me reverse is on. I'm popping it into second. Second is on. This is low. Low is on. And I think this is going to be fourth gear. So that's the gear indicator correct. And I think it's really important to check this stuff as you go through. I did remove my neutral switch at the same time, so it wasn't trying to say that it's a neutral and a gear, because the computers don't actually like that, eh? They really have some trouble. So the last circuit for me to do is going to be fuel pump outputs. So it starts and runs a heap nicer. Now it's actually got a gear input or a neutral. It was probably a bit lost before. I did need to put some petrol in. Just a little hint. They don't run very well on air. They actually need petrol going to the injectors. We also need to remember I'm running a 3UZ which on a 2UZ ECU with a 3UZ airflow meter with the incorrect injectors, the wrong fuel pressure, no VVTI. So I'm pretty happy with the way it's running. So fuel pump circuit. Some of these vehicles had a fuel pump computer. So I'm going to use another solution. And it's going to be a tachometric relay. So a little relay that when it gets a tacho output, gets a tacho signal, it will switch over and start running. I've got a few different units that I normally use. Today's one, I'm going to have a search around and see what I've actually got, because I am getting low on them. But I'm sure I've got something that'll do the job. My fuel pump has power! So I fitted up the tachometric relay. I've dropped one of the relays from the base settings. Fired the tachometric relay in. It's connected into the tacho signal. Funny enough, being a tachometric relay. It gets a signal. When it gets a signal, it outputs another signal. So it receives any pulse. I can put it on the crank sensor, on an injector signal, on a cam sensor. Any of those work. The tacho signal that goes to the air conditioning. Any of those. And then I can have it output a positive or a negative. I've chosen negative. So it's a really, really cool little problem solver. I actually had another older one here. So I had this older style one. They were made up. My mate in Australia had those made up, and they had like a prime function. So when it got an initial power up, it got the ignition signal, it would output a negative signal for a few seconds. So I like to prime the fuel pump. So they're a cool unit as well. But fortunately, I had one of my normal ones in stock. So I'm happy that I had that. Right, I'm pretty much done. I am happy. It's got a fuel pump. It's got the wires to connect into the ECU when it goes together. I probably should do some instructions. So for you guys, hope that's been helpful. So of course I've fired up a 2UZ ECU on a 3UZ engine with a 3UZ airflow meter. It'll get the transmission, the 4-speed transmission from the 2UZ, and it's all going into a KZJ78, I think. Now I'm going to move into custom instructions. So for those of you that aren't really interested in that, hope you enjoyed this. And for those of you who want to possibly catch some more tips, let's check out some instructions. Righto. So here's the instructions for the owner of this. His name's Darren. He lives in the other island of New Zealand. We've got three main islands: the North Island, the South Island, and Stewart Island, which is the small island. There's a couple others. There's the Chatham Islands, which is another little group, but it's not measured as the main part of New Zealand. So anyway, I'm going to do some instructions for Darren. Couple of reasons. One, by the time this all happens and we get moving forward, I'm going to forget, because I'm going to have done many more looms after this one. But it's also good for other guys that are doing similar jobs, because they might pick up something in something that I say that will make a difference for them. I'm actually going to be generating a set of wiring instructions from this job as well. It's taken me far longer than I should have, but it's been a good learning curve, and I enjoy that challenge. I actually really relish learning and the differences that we find and some of the problems that we have. The vehicle that this setup came out of is very different. I found it in Toyo DIY, which I showed earlier. But when I went to actually put it into parts catalogs that I have access to, it doesn't exist. This is quite a different vehicle. Bulletproof glass, ex-embassy car, so there were some differences in it, and I'm probably never going to find the exact differences, but this has been really interesting for me as well. So if you've got other guys, if anyone knows about the embassy cars and some of the differences, I'd be really interested to find out, and so let me know. Right, instructions. Stick the loom on the engine. Plug all the plugs in. That's really easy, eh? This is air conditioning. There'll be an air conditioning pump here, and you'll only actually need one of those wires in that. They are identified in here. Somewhere in here, one of these does say air conditioning. So it's in this one. I went and zip tied it all together nice and tight. AC. So there's the three AC wires. This one here. So you're going to want to change your oil pressure switch and put the sender unit out of the Prado into the 2UZ. And if it doesn't plug in, then the plug will need to be changed. Coming up here, we've discussed fan switch. So there's fan switch wiring if we need it. And I have put in a relay for the fan circuit, and the output is here. If we want to run two fans, I might actually make a little change. I can do that quite easily. I might just move the fuel pump over and put two fan outputs just in case you're running two fans. This all stuff all plugs in, so that's nice and simple. Brand new Hitachi MAF sensor, all set in, put in the right place, got the arrow for the correct direction. This engine really likes kicking over to the side when I fire it up. Alternator will be wired into your Prado as per normal, so that I've got information on that for you. Airflow meter. I will put the correct plug on and I will supply the Hitachi airflow meter for you. Walking around the back here. Transmission loom. So it all just plugs in here. Make sure they plug in nice and tight. Shift selector, gear indicator. We've discussed that. That just plugs in. And that's a temperature switch. Going down the transmission, there is the solenoid plug. Rear oxygen sensors I've just pulled them in. They're still in place. The pinout for the Euro spec for this vehicle is different, so we can't run those, and I didn't move them. If we really had to, we could. It'll throw a code in the ECU, however, it won't throw a check light. Well, it shouldn't. If it does, we'll come up with another plan. And there, of course, is your forward drive, the center diff engagement. Now those wires there come up to those plugs again. So they come up into here. And it's marked DL, diff lock. Diff lock. There's your reverse for your reverse lights. Over here you've got level switch, speedo wires at the back of the transfer. That's your oil light. There's some switches on the transmission. That's all labelled in the diagrams. A couple of earths and a water temp. So that's in those two plugs there. These two are the start inhibit going down to the transmission, so they can be connected into the Prado as well. In this department, we've got big main battery power on this white plug. In this plug here, 12 volt, that is the ignition in that 12. So that needs to get an ignition source. And this one here is an extra one input that will turn the fans on depending on how the air conditioning gets done. And there's an earth for anything else we need to run. That's your tachometric relay, so that's actually controlling the fuel pump now, firing the circuit opening relay for the fuel pump. Over here we have your OBD2 plug and just the TE1 plug, which does, you can do fault codes manually. Got a heap of wires here. And I've marked them all up with what they are. Tacho, stop lights, start, electrical load signal, power, L4, W, which is your check light, oil W, oil warning light, NSW. And they're the main ones from the ECU to connect into the Prado wiring loom. As I've said, this Land Cruiser with this JDM output, the ECU, is really close to the KZJ78 pinout, and the functions between the two ECUs is really similar. So these wires exist on your Prado. That's so cool. There are some extras, so I'll chuck some extra pins into the bag as well, or I'll tape them to the ECU. So if you want to put in stuff for air conditioning and stuff like that, that can be done as well. The main stuff, however, works like it should and is really simple. These two just plug in. They can't go anywhere different. So it's actually really simple to put together. Plug it on the engine, plug everything in, into the cabin, plug it in, plug this bit in, power this up, and you'll have an engine that runs. And to run it on the ground, same thing. Permanent battery power, some ignition voltage. Oh, start. Starter. So the start goes in here on the main power wire. That one there, which of course I don't have your one. So I've jumped in here. So that wire goes in, you'll find it on this wire here, on the main battery cable input. there is the water temp switch or the fan switch. Once we work out what's happening there. And a big wad of paperwork to come with this one. It's actually looking pretty neat. I'm pretty happy with the overall, how it came up around the ECU. Pretty bloody happy. Right, let's hear it run one more time. Just going to pop it into neutral, neutral, into neutral. Turn the ignition on. Oh, don't forget the earths. Don't forget the earths back there. You can also see what it does when it doesn't have a gear input. It doesn't seem to idle so nice, but it gives it like a lumpy cam effect. So here I have a 2UZFE ECU non-VVTi running a 3UZ engine, which is a VVTi engine. And I did that because the coils work with the 2UZ. The crank trigger and the cam trigger is the same. However, I fitted a 1UZ VVTi throttle body because it's the same as the 2UZ. So 2UZ non-VVTi running a 3UZ, which is VVTi. Same engine configurations. The other day, I ran my test 1UZ VVTi on a 2UZ VVTi ECU. But that one has a throttle body that's closer to the 3UZ throttle body. But it ran. I used an adapter to that loom. Now, just crazy talk, what about a VVTi or the later model post 98 ECU on a non-VVTi engine? Now that's crazy talk. We see it asked. I had a man ring about it the other day. What a crazy idea. I must be nuts just to think about it. But would it work? Have a think about it. People might say I'm crazy if I even suggested it, because that's just a totally dumb idea. It's been great getting that 2UZ sorted and running, and I've learned a shitload. So Darren, I hope that's been helpful. I hope I've put all the right information together. Got a little package for you to go down with this other stuff, your filters and fuel pump and stuff like that. So it's all ready to go in a box, and we'll catch up with you another day. Catch you later.